we welcome you to the Fran Ryan Center for our Conversations and Coffee on this 5th day of March, 2026. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. Conversations and Coffee is grateful to be at home, away from home, here at the Fran Ryan Center, while our beloved Cultural Arts Center is being renovated. We thank Kyle Farnbach and faculty and staff here for welcoming us. And we're grateful to Fran Ryan for her leadership in our city in multiple ways through services and programs. Fran is a dedicated champion for the senior citizens community. And thank you to you, our gathered audience, for being with us today to celebrate our artist, Tom Baillieul. Yay, Tom. You want to stand up there? No. Tom is a painter, instructor in painting, scientist, historian, traveler, and advocate for the earth. Husband of Deb. Yay, Deb. Father, grandfather. Tom is sharing for our Conversations and Coffee today the stories behind the art. He coordinates amazing exhibitions in our Priscilla Tyson Cultural Arts Center's main gallery and continually develops new programming ideas. Look what I have here. The program for 2026 through 2027. Isn't that amazing? Yay, and all of us benefit from this, huh? In addition to being an artist, his formal education was in the earth sciences, with minors in history and archaeology. But art was always with him in the background. Science and art are two sides of the same coin for me, Tom says. Since retiring from the federal government in 2003, his attention has turned more fully to art. Tom always finds a place in the house for his art, and Debbie's going, Yeah. He has served on the boards as an officer of the Clintonville Arts Guild and the Ohio Arts League, and has co-curated major art exhibitions around Columbus. Since 2013, Tom has held a part-time position as exhibitions coordinator and grant writer for our Priscilla R. Tyson Cultural Arts Center. His training and experiences in the earth sciences have shaped the way he perceives the physical world, giving him the ability to think in 4 dimensions: the 3 spatial dimensions, and what he names deep time. A lifelong interest in anthropology and the evolution of abstract reasoning in us humans, along with time spent among other cultures, informs his integration of cultural symbolism in many artworks. Tom's art emerges from the ideas that pop continuously into his mind. He doesn't pursue a single style or subject matter or medium. Rather, he has broad themes and styles that he returns to as new ideas arise. Nearly every work he creates is a narrative. He presents a concept, a snapshot image, or a question, whether addressing issues of social or environmental justice, cosmic connections, travel, or the humor of the surreal. Tom seeks to challenge viewers' perceptions of reality and try to get them to think deeply about who they are in relation to the world around them. And that's us, isn't it? The they is us. We viewers are then encouraged to complete the story from our own experiences. And now, Tom, to quote you, on to the show. And we look forward to sharing it with you. Thank you for being here. Bravo.
Okay, we'll find out how electronically challenged I am. We are all storytellers. One of the defining characteristics of our species, we're the only species that I know of that tells stories and makes art. And often the stories we tell are told through the art that we create. How many stories can be told about a work of art? Well, I started listing these, and the first story is, who is the artist? Where do they come from? What are their life experiences? How does that relate to the art that they produce? There's a story about the inspiration. Where did the idea come from? You know, all artists get inspired to create, but what is that inspiration? The third story is putting it all together. What are the materials? How did they construct the artwork? How many times did they go back and change things? Does the artwork itself tell a story? What is the message that the artist is trying to send? Or is there a message? How does the artist's life experiences relate to that? And then we get to the critics and the historians who try to tell us what we should be seeing and try to come up with their own story. Well, it's what they do, and it drives frequently the commercial side of art. But the most important is you and the stories that come to your mind when you look at an artwork, because you bring your own personal experiences, your own memories to the experience of viewing a work of art. And I had a good friend, who used to teach theater at the University of Pittsburgh. And he related one day that he had a student who came running into class and said, I just saw, and I forget which play it was, and I want to talk to you about what's the meaning behind it? What's the significance of this and that? And my friend, the professor, looked at him and said, first of all, did you enjoy the play? And the student said, well, yeah. And he said, then that's it. That's all you need. You know, if you want to delve deeper, you can, but go with the enjoyment of the experience. I'd like to take us back in time and look at some famous artworks. These are images from the caves of Lascaux in France between 17,000 and 20,000 years ago. These artworks have been dated, and these are paintings on the stone surfaces of caves in France. And I want you to look at this one here with the bison. And let's go through some of these stories. Who's the artist? Who is the artist behind this work? Well, the artist was clearly of our species, Homo sapiens. We know that because of the age dates for this. Male or female? We don't know. Archaeologists coming out of the Victorian era, of course, always assigned works of art like this to men, discounting that women could do this sort of thing. But we don't know. As a matter of fact, if you look at the handprints here, One of the things that we know is that if you look at the relative lengths of digits, like the ring finger to the middle finger, you find that handprints like that are pretty much 50-50 male, female. And so, what's the age of the artist? Well, this is probably not a child doing this. An artwork like this reflects amazing talent and probably a lot of practice before they got to this stage and ability to handle the material. So this is an accomplished artist. Tells us something about the lives of these people, that they weren't spending all their time out hunting and foraging. They had a lot of time to tell stories and reflect and depict their world in great art. What was the purpose behind this? What was the story that the artist was telling? Again, we don't know. Earlier period archaeologists looking at this said, well, clearly this has, deep spiritual significance related to the hunt and all of this. Well, that's a lot of speculation. We don't know. We just have the art to appreciate. And then, of course, we have our own reactions. When the first people of the modern era went into these caves and saw these amazing paintings on the wall, they were just gobsmacked. I mean, they were just awestruck by the number of images and the quality of the art and the time span over which these were laid down on these cave walls.
What was this?
17,000 to 22,000 years ago. Yeah. Now, one thing we can tell about this is we know something about the materials that were used. These were natural pigments, colored clays or crushed stones of different colors. The black is probably soot from the fireplaces, and for a binder, they used animal fat. And it created these permanent images. Though they did have to close the caves to visitors a couple decades ago because people going in, their breath exhalations were raising the humidity in the caves, and they were starting to grow mold of these. So what they did was they created an exact replica in a museum, and that's what you get to tour today. Yes?
How long do people like the people that are that go in there and do that to do? Yes, or
It requires a lot, really special permission. You have to be an accredited researcher to go in and have a specific reason to be going in other than to just look at the art. If you're an art historian, you need to be satisfied with the photographic images and the reproductions.
Monitoring it, like if it's continuing to decay or continuing to.
They monitor it. They monitor it, and they go in, and I don't know if there's been any restoration work that's been attempted. There may have been, go in and put some algicides on it that don't damage the pigments. That's a story for another event. One thing I would point out, throughout Europe and even in the Americas, we find in caves and on rock faces, we find handprints of people who preceded us. And we even find handprints of Neanderthals, a species of humans that predated our own. And what's significant is there's two types of handprints. One is you put your hand down in the paint and you go smack, and you leave a print behind. And in the other, you hold your hand up against the rock and you blow pigment around it, take your hand away, and you're left with that silhouette. And what's significant about these handprints is that they are a statement across time that says, I was here, me, even though we don't know who they were. Just to show the variety of ancient artworks, let's see. On the left, the Venus of Bassam Pui, 25,000 years ago. The Venus of Willendorf, 25 to 30,000 years ago. And then the Lion Man, carved in ivory, 35,000 to 41,000 years ago. Approximate dates for those. Each of these artworks created by a human being with some story in mind that we can never know. We can make informed guesses. We can make wild guesses. Particularly, the Lion Man there, putting a lion's head on a human body. What was the story? What was the story the artist was telling to their peers? We'll never know, but we can enjoy and marvel at the thought that these people had, the depth of thinking that they had, and the care with which they created works of art like this. And to show that art isn't just restricted to paintings and sculpture. There's the art that we apply to ourselves as part of the story that we tell about ourselves. Body art, poems tell a story, novels tell a story, music tells a story, dance tells a story. Any work of art, you can go through this checklist of the different types of stories. We're lucky when we have the artist's own words to help us understand at least what was the inspiration, what was the message they're trying to give. Vincent van Gogh was a prolific letter writer. He wrote letters to his brother Theo. He wrote to other artists and friends, and he would describe his days. He would describe the ideas that kept bubbling up in his mind. So here's a picture of his bedroom, and here's a page out of the letter that he wrote to a friend describing where that idea came from, how he did it. Edward Hopper kept a journal of all of his paintings, and he would note down in there the details about the pigments, the colors he used, the composition, where the idea came from. He would write down the exhibition history of the work and how much it eventually sold for and to whom. So he left a very detailed record of his own art. And this is one of my favorites. This is the great composer and conductor Paul Hindemith, and he recounts having a sudden flash of inspiration where an entire orchestral score appeared in his mind, and that he then had to rush to get it all down on musical manuscript before that memory faded. It took him several days to do it, but to have, there it was, complete in his mind. And then he just had to go and actually put it down and preserve it. That didn't happen to all his compositions. That was the only one. But it just shows that inspirations can come from anywhere. What stories do we get from the critics who try to tell us what we are looking at and try to explain it? If they're really good critics and historians, they won't try to force an interpretation on us. They will talk about the artist and where the artist has come from and their careers and things like that. The great essayist and art critic Clement Greenberg in the 1950s and 60s decided that abstract expressionism was the highest form of art, and that all other art should just be set aside. And so he was a great advocate for painters like Andy Warhol and the other abstract expressionists. And this is not Andy Warhol, Jackson Pollock. Thank you. That's a Jackson Pollock. And the critics of that time who were promoting abstract expressionism relegated representational art, and here's a Norman Rockwell painting, to the category of mere illustration. But as you can see, I mean, Norman Rockwell created stories with his art. And this is an amazing story about integrating schools, I believe in Selma, Alabama, was it? The young girl, Ruby, being guided to school by U.S. Marshals. And this was a historic event. And it's a chronicle of that era. Now, closer to home, I'm going to talk about some of my work, because I can at least go through all of these story characteristics. How many of you have ever read the book Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes? Okay. Yep. Well, I first encountered the stories in the 1980s, teaching Sunday school. And what I learned from that story was the origami paper crane was at one time considered, or the crane itself was considered a symbol of longevity and of a good life. But following Sadako's story, and I'll encourage you to read that, the origami crane has since become a symbol of the Japanese children's prayer for an end to all war forever. And I took that, and I've used the origami crane in a lot of artworks that I've done over the years. And looking at things like on the left, that building is ground zero at Hiroshima. That's where the first atomic bomb went off, was above that building. That was the International Exhibition Hall in Hiroshima, built in the 1920s, I believe. And the Japanese government has left that standing because of what it symbolizes, and it's a key element of the Hiroshima Peace Park. And so I struggled. I did not have an image from that angle of that building. I had to look at the side projections in a whole variety of photos and invent that perspective. And the idea of the cranes, the origami cranes, spiraling up out of that, bringing peace outwards. So that was a real challenge. I have folded a lot of paper cranes in my art, and doing things like putting together a spindle of a long rod with a point on it and on a wooden base, and then sticking the cranes on and photographing them from all different angles to get the angles that I want for a painting. And the interesting side story of that is I entered it into an exhibition at the First English Lutheran Church here in Columbus. I believe they're out Main Street. And there was a year where they created in their basement area the Alpha and Omega Gallery. And I entered a juried show there, and that got in. And I was told that opening night for the reception, a couple walked into the gallery, and they had just come back from Japan and had toured Hiroshima. And they looked across the gallery at this painting hanging on the far wall, and they said to the woman at the check-in desk, they said, we have to own that. And so it sold that night. This crane, the multicolored origami paper crane, was another thought, and my good friend Donna's hands, and taken in the dining room of our house where I suspended the crane on a thread from an overhead light fixture.
This looks like the yellow one. That one looks just like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, that's the whole idea of these cranes going up into the air and out into the world, bringing a message of peace to all people.
How timely that would be at
Yes.
this moment.
Other ideas, other themes. There was a point where I'm not exactly sure, I don't remember exactly what the inspiration was, but I got this idea of the yellow smiley face, this iconic image. Walmart was using it in their ads for a couple of years, and I was thinking, what would it be like if I would put the smiley face in a context that was contradictory, you know, and start raising the question of why are these people smiling? What is it that makes them smile? And so I created, in the end, I had 11 different paintings on that concept. And so this was the first one, Happy to Be Here, workers somewhere in a sweatshop making our clothes. And you have to ask the question, do they really want to be there? And the answer is, yeah, because they're earning money. But they also know that if they were to object to their conditions, there's another person right outside the door willing to step in and take their place. So it's, you know, this dynamic, this tug between being happy and content and being unhappy at the same time. So, you know, using the smiley face to raise those questions. And this is just a picture of the prop that I used. I had a cloth frisbee that I spray painted yellow and painted a smiley face on, and that allowed me to actually put it in many different orientations to allow me to get the right perspectives for the subjects in the paintings.
So it almost looks like a picture rather than a painting.
Well, and that's,
Paint this.
yes, it is a painting. It got into a number of juried shows. Denny Griffiths, the former president of CCAD, was the juror for one of those shows, and he liked it because of the contradictory messages that it was sending. The reviewer for the Dispatch called it cartoonish. So, I mean, you know, different people bring their own perspectives to the art. Okay, now let's go to live art. As I said, the origami crane has played into a lot of the work that I've done. March of 2003, George W. Bush is about to launch an invasion into Iraq, Operation Enduring Freedom. And there was a vigil held on an evening in March in 2003 at the Unitarian Universalist Church up in Clintonville. And Deb and I went to that, and we sat, And there were a lot of people getting up and reciting poetry. You know, it was a vigil and a protest against engaging in a war whose purpose really, you know, we didn't understand, still don't. So I'm sitting there listening to people reading these poems, and I've got a piece of paper, and I start writing down my own words. And the first idea that came to me was a haiku. And the haiku said, "The general's orders, folded into paper cranes, war transformed to peace." And I looked at it, and I said, there's a painting in that. And so I left that evening and started to ponder, what would I paint? How would I do this? How would I depict that haiku? And I ended up getting out a map. This was a map of Devon in England, an ordnance survey map, because we'd traveled to England a few years before and picked that up, and I still had it. And I had my binoculars and my own triangular ruler and my own compass and a pen. And then I folded cranes and put them in different orientations, and then created, you know, the image of the order of battle, which is now being folded miraculously into cranes and just flying away with it. This got into a show at the Ohio Art League back when the Columbus Museum of Art every other year featured the Ohio Art League. So this was for a month in the Museum of Art here. It also was accepted into an international online art exhibition called the Peace Project out of the Art Rome Gallery in Rome, Italy. So it's had some representation out there. The other poem that I came up with that night in March of 2003, very short, very simple, was, and it's, the image is here, and it's, "They started it. Fingers point across the playground. They started it. Fingers point across the globe. Someday we may grow up." And that led to this painting here of children arguing on the playground and grown-ups arguing with real munitions. And what do we learn from both experiences? And so,
Anyone have any comment? Yes.
Yes.
Looked like they're going to just have fun, the children.
Yes.
Like they're gonna fight the one guy, the kids put the one guy back.
Yeah, they've got, you know, the nice thing is that some of the people, some of the students in this are trying to stop the argument, trying to stop the fight. It'd be nice if we had grown-ups who could do that as well. Yes.
So it seems like a cycle. You know, you got these kids, those kids will grow into adults and continue this. You know, it just seems like a human condition that sadly that we may never evolve from.
Well, I mean, look at who we are. We are evolved apes. I mean, we are related to the great apes. We still have in our heads the ape brain that is overlain by our prefrontal cortex, which is the center of conscience and moral thought and control. But sometimes we let our lower brain take over. And you know, humans have always had this innate distrust of the other. And so, you know, that's what we have to overcome with our more rational minds. and recognizing that the other is us. It's a hard sell for a lot of people. Okay. 2004, I'm driving up to Delaware to a printer's. I'm picking up yard signs for Adam Miller's State Board of Education campaign. Driving across, through the open farm fields, and I'm thinking, I want to do another origami crane painting, but what do I want to do it on? And then, kind of like Hindemith, all of a sudden, there was the image that came into my head. And so I looked at the idea of what happens if the children's prayer goes unanswered. And that's the title of this piece, Unanswered Prayer. And I put it together. I borrowed my son was in the Army Reserve at the time. And I said, can I borrow your combat boots for a little while? He said, sure. And he also had some brass shell casings. I said, give me half a dozen of those. And I went out into the backyard to our garden, freshly turned over garden soil and all. And I said, oh, I got some broken bricks. So I tossed them in there and started taking some photographs. Well, then I went to a painting class. I used to paint Wednesday evenings at the Cultural Arts Center when Tracy Steinbrook was the instructor. So this is 2004. I go into the painting class and I say, okay, I'm going to sketch out the composition first on paper. So I got a piece of paper this size and actually made the boots into an ink stamp and stamped them on the paper in this orientation and scattered the bullets around and traced around those. And I realized as I was going along, sketching all these pieces, that I was crying. I just, was tearing up, and, I realized, oh, I'm getting a message from this. And so I was pretty much done, so I rolled everything up and left. And then it took about 2 days of painting to actually complete the composition, complete the painting. And I've shown it occasionally. I took it once to a critique night that the Ohio Art League ran. And what I found very interesting was several of the people looking at it tried to force a happy ending into this. And, for me, over time, I've come to realize that the important message here really is whenever there is conflict small, conflict large, it is the children who suffer. Now, I'm not allowed to hang this in the house, and I tried to give the stuffed rabbit, I washed it, threw it in the washer, and it came out perfectly clean. I said, here, take this over to the preschool, and Deb said, not on your life, I know where that's been. So, I've had people look at this, the former senior minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church. I did show it there. He walked in, looked at it, and then said to me, it was like a gut punch when he finally realized what he was looking at. So it's a powerful piece. It doesn't get shown much, but there is a story here. You all could probably come up with your own narrative. What happened here? This is a snapshot in time. What happened here? Who left the boot prints? Obviously, there was gunfire. Yes. A shooter? Yeah, it could be. Or it could be somebody who came after the shooter. And I'm leaving that up to you to complete the story. The stuffed rabbit. Whose was it? Yeah? Probably a little kid. That's my thought. Or was it something that was just left out? You know, kids were playing in the field and they just left it there. We don't know. I'm not giving you those answers. I'm letting you come up with them. So that's one of the things I like to do with my painting, is not tell you everything. I want you to come up with your own stories. Yeah.
Experience and relationship is some way. Val Pennington, yes, that's up on Indianola. The last year or the year before, he had what I thought a very creative idea. He asked for people to submit pictures, and he invited a group of poets coming and pick a picture that appealed to them, write a poem. And I had several pictures in it. For one, some of you have seen the picture. I had the four men sitting at the bar, at the cafe in Tommy. And that picture has been very thought-provoking for a lot of people. And the person wrote the poem. You were given the font at the end of the exhibit. So I read it, and there's a table, four men who clearly come together like maybe a McDonald's for coffee and coffee, And so I saw that picture. Could you cite the talked. I lost what I was going to say. People wrote the poem, and we were given the poem, and it was a rather lengthy poem, and it's a picture, if you can envision it, four men who clearly get together every week or every day even and talk about what's going on. And there are four chairs, and there are two empty chairs. I have sold that picture. I have hung that picture. I have done everything with that picture except wonder why those two chairs were empty. And that was the gist of the poem that he wrote. That art taught, my art taught me something I didn't learn.
And that's the whole idea behind what's called ekphrastic poetry, where a poet responds to an artwork. They don't describe the artwork in the poem, they react to it and create a narrative that's come into their mind from the image that they're seeing. And we've done that at the Cultural Arts Center after some of our exhibitions. We've had poets come in, and then we've had poetry reading nights with the art behind them. And it's a lot of fun, and you realize, and I've realized with a number of my paintings, that the message I think I'm sending is not the message that the viewers are getting. They're coming up with their own narrative. Okay, let's see. As we move along, I have a style of painting that I call my stripe style. It goes back to the 1970s when we were living in Botswana, Southern Africa, and we went into the National Museum and Gallery in the capital city of Gaborone. And this one time we went in, on the wall was this very large canvas that was all in dark earth tones, browns and dark and tans, and a little bit of blue that might be water. And it was all these horizontal stripes, and the painting was called Strata. And being a geologist, I said, oh, strata, cool. Yeah, I know that. But that concept stayed with me. And over the years, I've developed a style of paintings with very geometric backgrounds, horizontal stripes. And as Ellen mentioned in the introduction, I've got backgrounds in archaeology, anthropology, and I still keep up with the field. Yes?
How long did it take to make that picture?
I'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to point out this one again, which is the idea of doesn't matter what color our skin, we are all Africans. our ancestors all came from this one continent. It was just at different times. These migrations that happened out of Africa into Europe, into Asia, down into Australia and the islands of the Pacific, and then over into North America. And then later migrations of Europeans coming across the ocean, either willingly or unwillingly, into North America and South America as well. So I wanted to point out in here, not only are we all Africans at the very heart of it, migrations, immigration is what people do. Our ancestors have all been immigrants at one time or another. It's part of human nature. And so this whole idea now that we're against immigrants, well, that goes back to that fear of the other and otherness. But really, it's only us. You know, we are one. Then,
Anyone have any comments here? Yes.
yeah.
How long did that take you to do that?
These actually are quite complicated, so it takes a lot of hours. I don't actually know exactly how many hours, but you know, these are some of the more complicated pieces because I want to get them precise. And the stripes, I use a lot of masking tape to get the edges clean. I'll go through a roll and a half of masking tape on just one canvas. And each of these colored bands or stripes, there's probably about 3 or 4 different times that I've gone over it to get exactly the right shade and get the right coverage so that you don't see the canvas through. You see it on this one as well. This is a painting called Cornish Holiday, Cornwall in England. We were visiting there a number of years ago, and the interesting thing, St. Ives, the town in Cornwall, has a long tradition as being an art center. There were art colonies there, and the Tate Gallery in England has one of their branch museums in St. Ives. And so we went in, we looked at the exhibitions, and then we went up to have lunch on the upper floor, and we're looking out over the bay from St. Ives, and just the colors of the day, we said, oh, there's a painting in that. And we've both done multiple paintings based on that one day, one afternoon in St. Ives. So this is the one that I came up with. I said, I'm going to try it with the striped style. And I guess one of the highest compliments I got was this got into an exhibition at the Brindu Art Center out in Granville, Ohio. And what they do for their exhibitions is they hand visitors Post-it notes and say, leave a thought next to the artwork that inspires you. And I got a Post-it note from probably a 12-year-old young woman who just said, I can't believe that there aren't any curved lines in there. I'm seeing curves and not just everything is a straight line. I thought, I did it. She got it. And so, but this is not everything I do has a deep social message. Some of it is just about being human, having fun, enjoying a day. And then Deb said I ought to present something related to the time that I spent in Southern Africa in Botswana. I was a Peace Corps volunteer from 1971 to 1973. In 1971, June of 71, I went over, and our first 4 weeks, my volunteer group, we were out in a village with language instructors. They were teaching us how to speak in Setswana, the language of the country. And one day, as part of our language lessons and acculturation, they took us to see a witch doctor. And so it was very interesting. We went into this mud-walled, thatched-roofed hut where the witch doctor lived. And he said, you know, for a price, he would, tell us our fortune or, tell us something about ourselves. And actually, he wanted to know, had any of us been recently ill? Well, I was just getting over a minor head cold. And so I said, well, yeah, I've had a cold. Can you tell me, how I got it and that. And we all dug deep in our pockets, and we eventually came up together. We came up with 50 cents to hand the witch doctor, which was the appropriate fee. And then I was given the different shaped bones, and he showed me how to blow on them, shake them in my hand, and cast them down onto the floor, and then he would read the bones. And so the medicine man, the witch doctor, looked and he said, well, nobody is putting an evil spell on you. This was all natural. And, it'll go away, just, drink plenty of fluids, get rest. He said, but I can't exclude the possibility that it may have been the result of bad sex. And I'm thinking, okay, he knew how to play to his audience. So that's the story behind. Somebody had a Polaroid camera and snapped a picture. That's me at the time. So it's winter in southern Africa, so I'm wearing my heavy jacket. But to put this together, I had the Polaroid image that didn't have everything in it, and I wanted to have people in there, and this was staged in the kitchen of our house. That's my mother-in-law. That's one of my sons, and I think this was Deb, staged in there so I could get how the fabric and folds went and all. And I struggled with how to make those bones appear as though they're in midair on their way to hitting the floor. And this was a challenge I worked on again at the Cultural Arts Center on a Wednesday evening to get that to come together. And then finally, I don't just paint. I work in fiber occasionally. This again is one of the African-themed pieces that I've done. My time traveling through the Kalahari Desert, I fell in love with a bird called a lilac-breasted roller. Yes?
Those.
You've heard of those? To me, they're the most beautiful bird in the world. And they're so much fun because when they fly, they spin and loop and twirl, and their wings that are open flash electric blue sparks. And it took a long time to figure out how to present that type of motion in a quilt. I did so many different sketches, and I'd looked at them and go, nope, nope, nope. And then I finally came up with this almost
Quilt?
That's a quilt. That's fabric, African.
Like over the quilt. I love that.
Yeah. And the challenge, of course, was how to get the ends of the wings to stand out and not flop.
You did that.
How long did that take? A long time. Yeah, this was a long time. And Deb, who's quite an accomplished fiber artist, I went to her and I said, okay, how do I get the feathers to stand out? And she looked at me and said, You're on your own, boy. So there's popsicle sticks in each of those. And the other one, well, we're getting short on time, so maybe we can just hold this one up. And this is my latest, most recent art quilt, finished about a year ago. No, this is done at home. I have my own sewing machine.
His own art gallery at home.
I've been doing art since 1969, say. Yes. Yeah.
I'll go and take a sewing class. Was it like any sewing in that?
It's all sewing. This is all sewing. Yeah. Needle and thread, sewing machine. Yeah. So, anyways, I'm going to call that a wrap at this point.
Wasn't that an amazing journey? Thank you, Tom. Oh, and Deb, right there by your side, straight. Love, wonderful. And thank you, audience, for being here.